other problem is that the United States is starting to export less agricultural commodities, and that is a lot in part due to Mr. Trump's trade policies.
You spend months nurturing your crops, only to wake up one morning and realize your entire harvest suddenly has nowhere to go. Sounds ridiculous. But that's exactly what's happening across the American Midwest. As China unexpectedly cancels billions of dollars worth of American soybean orders, setting off a domino effect that threatens U.S. agriculture in the middle of a shifting global trade landscape. There were harvest seasons when Iowa and Illinois soybeans sailed confidently to China, sustaining farm families and small Midwest towns. But this week, everything changed. China abruptly canceled contracts for 2.4 million tons of U.S. soybeans. A $1.1 billion blow, soybean prices plunged 8.2% overnight. Storage bins are now 13% fuller. With no buyers, I've never seen my harvest just sit here with no idea what comes next, says a 53-year-old Iowa farmer. The region faces $470 million in lost revenue, impacting not just big farms, but also groceries, tuition, and savings for thousands of families. If the situation continues, average income for Midwest soybean households could drop another $1,200 to $1,800 this year, and about 4,500 seasonal jobs may vanish before the next harvest. The question lingers: who will buy the beans that have fed this land for generations? Not long ago, American soybeans were China's top choice, with Midwest shipments part of rural life. Now, after over $11 billion in Chinese-backed investment in Brazil's ports and railways, Brazil has taken over. Chinese buyers now pay $14 to $22 more per ton for reliable, long-term supply from Brazil, which provides 70% of China's soybean imports. For many American farmers, this shift isn't just about lost income, it's about being pushed aside in a changing world. This year, U.S. soybean exports to China may drop by up to 10 million tons, about 20%, forcing over 6,000 family farms to cut production or risk bankruptcy. Soybeans were once the ticket to a secure future. Now they are a question mark hanging over tomorrow. Is America still an agricultural powerhouse, or quietly becoming an outsider at the world's export table? It's not just soybeans under pressure corn. America's golden crop is feeling it too. U.S. corn exports to China have plunged 79% year on year. China also released 1 million more tons from its reserves to cut reliance on U.S. suppliers. For many Midwest farmers, once hopeful fields now bring worry. As corn prices drop and incomes shrink, tough decisions loom about next year's planning and keeping the family farm going. If this trend continues, U.S. corn prices may drop another 10 to 12% in the next 3 months, slashing profits for middle-aged farmers by $900 to $1,500 per household this year. Over 2,000 small farms might suspend operations or cut acreage by 15 to 20% next season. Some changes come quietly by the time you feel them. They're already woven into the fabric of everyday rural life. Every shipload of soybeans now carries more than a harvest. It represents America's global standing. As China and South American partners develop a new trading system, using less dollars and favoring long-term deals, the U.S. role is fading. Without quick investment in infrastructure and modernized supply chains, American farmers could lose their vital spot in the global market. If no major changes happen, U.S. soybean export value may drop another 15 to 20% next year, costing 8,000 to 1,000 jobs in soybean states. Someday we might look back and wonder, was there a time when America's strength was measured by the price of a bushel of soybeans?
The United States have sent us a letter with measures that would come into effect unless there is a negotiated solution. So we will therefore also extend the suspension of our countermeasures till early August.
Something big just happened, and almost no one is prepared for the fallout. America's aggressive new tariffs have set off a trade war with the EU and Canada, triggering billion-dollar reprisals and forcing the world's supply chains into uncharted territory. Imagine you're an experienced engineer at Boeing's Seattle plant. One evening, you hear the administration is imposing 30 to 50% tariffs on goods from the EU, Mexico, and Canada. Within hours, the EU cancels a $43 billion Boeing order. Canada and the EU retaliate with $95 billion in counter tariffs, and quickly shift major deals to Airbus and other suppliers. Suddenly, familiar business partners back away. Next morning, the factory feels different. Workers quietly discuss possible layoffs, pay cuts, and worry about the next bonus or summer plans. It's not just Boeing suppliers. Cafeteria owners and small machine shops near the plant also get nervous as big clients look elsewhere. If cancellations and the move to Airbus continue, 15,000 to 18,000 jobs could disappear from aerospace hubs in Washington and Texas in the first year. With average monthly earnings at $5,500 per worker, these communities could lose $80 to $100 million in income monthly. Families with someone in aerospace may see their household budgets drop by $700 to $1,200 per month, forcing tough choices about groceries, mortgage, car payments, or tuition. In boardrooms at Ryanair, switching from Boeing to China's Comac jets is no longer out of the question. For the first time, European airlines are openly considering Chinese planes instead of American-made aircraft. This threatens the decades-old leadership of the FAA and the reputation of American aviation safety worldwide. Families in America's plane towns, proud to have relatives at Boeing, now worry about job security and long-term benefits. Skilled workers are left considering career changes if European airlines truly go Chinese. Outside the plants, local diners and gas stations notice fewer regulars as business slows. Should Ryanair and others make the switch to Comac, Boeing could lose at least 5,000 to 7,000 direct and indirect jobs in the U.S. over 2 years. The lost contract value could reach $8 to $10 billion, forcing thousands of families to cut back on savings, delay home purchases, or put off college plans for their children, while U.S. firms wait. Canada and the EU quickly use CETA for zero-tariff trade. Clean energy, rare earths, EV batteries all flow freely, bypassing the U.S. Many American suppliers are left out. U.S. contractors and engineers see deals shift to Canadian rivals. Projects are postponed. Salaries cut. Jobs lost. Opportunities in EVs and AI now head north. If this continues, U.S. sectors could lose 6,000 to 8,000 jobs in a year. Export contracts may drop $1,500 to $3,000 per month per company. Lost contracts could total $60 million per month across the sector. Across America, people talk about new EU trade deals with India, the Middle East, and Africa without U.S. involvement. Digital and green standards set the tone. Networks like EU Canada and China India are rising, with the U.S. left out. Anxiety rises for families tied to multinational firms, export jobs, or the dollar. Investments and savings now feel less secure as America's central role fades. If this shift continues, U.S. capital inflows could fall $150 to $200 billion per year. Families may see $300 to $500 per month less in investment returns and bonuses, forcing new budget decisions as America risks being left behind.
This bullying, we're a tenth of the size of that country, 300 million or 400 million people in the States and about 40 million in Canada, but we picked no fight. But it just keeps. He's proven that he doesn't even respect our country anymore.
Canadians are boycotting American goods. You don't need to protest or go on TV to make a political statement sometimes. All it takes is simply not placing that next Amazon order. When millions of Canadians collectively say no to Coca-Cola, Jack Daniels, or McDonald's, the U.S.-Canada supply chain starts to shake in ways no one quite expected. The quiet shift began in early 2025. About 85% of Canadians said they were actively replacing American-made goods with domestic alternatives, and 78% pledged to choose made-in-Canada products whenever possible. This wasn't just talk. Apps like MapleScan and OScanada have been downloaded by hundreds of thousands of users, helping shoppers scan barcodes to avoid American products. The ripple effect is spreading. Grocery stores now feature Canadian-only tags. And coffee shops have started offering Canadiano instead of Americano. Big American brands like McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Jack Daniels, and Tesla are seeing sales drop sharply, some by as much as 60% to 70% in Canada. For many Canadian families, that means spending an extra $5 to $10 each week when choosing domestic snacks or household items over their cheaper U.S. equivalents. Every purchase is starting to feel a little more political and a little more expensive. This soft boycott isn't just affecting store shelves, it's reaching into tourism and logistics too. The number of Canadian travelers heading to the U.S. dropped more than 18% in the first half of 2025, according to the U.S. Department of Commerce. In May alone, personal vehicle crossings at U.S.-Canada border checkpoints fell by 38.1%, the sharpest decline since 2020. That may sound like a traffic statistic, but it's hitting small towns hard. Tourism-heavy areas in states like New York, Vermont, and Washington lost tens of thousands of Canadian visitors, leading to roughly 14,000 jobs at risk in restaurants, hotels, and retail. Based on internal reports from the U.S. Travel Association, even Amazon has pulled back. In the second quarter of 2025, Amazon shut down 7 fulfillment centers in Quebec, cutting around 1,700 full-time jobs tied to North American distribution. This shift might not shake the entire U.S. economy overnight, but for people living near the border or working in freight and logistics, the income loss is real. A single canceled shipping route can mean $250 to $300 lost in wages per day for a truck driver. There are no loud protests or government bans here, just Canadians voting with their wallets. And some American companies are already feeling the pressure. McDonald's Canada saw a 60% sales decline in the first quarter of 2025, especially in provinces like British Columbia and Quebec. According to Restaurant Brands Canada, the company temporarily closed 18 underperforming locations to cut costs. Other well-known brands Heinz, Tesla, Jack Daniels, even Oreo are feeling the shift too, not because they've vanished from shelves, but because Canadian shoppers are increasingly choosing domestic alternatives. In a June 2025 survey by Field Agent Canada, 63% of consumers said they had already switched to Canadian food products, and 47% said they plan to keep doing so long-term. For U.S. factories that once supplied the Canadian market, this means fewer orders. A food packaging plant in Wisconsin, for example, that previously shipped bottle caps and labels to American brands in Canada, saw its orders drop by nearly 40% between April and June 2025. If the trend continues, some smaller operations may have to cut shifts or pause production for weeks later this year to balance out inventory. It's not a full-blown economic crisis yet, but it's clearly wearing down regional revenue and, more importantly, revealing a shift in long-term consumer behavior. Every time a Canadian family picks up a Maple Valley ketchup bottle instead of Heinz, or grabs a burger from the local diner instead of McDonald's, they're sending a quiet but powerful message about where their dollars go.
More Canadians come to America than tourists from any other country. Last year, Canadians made over 20 million visits to the U.S. and spent more than $20 billion here. But this year, many are not coming to America, as I saw firsthand on a recent trip to Vermont, right near the Canadian border.
Canadian visitors didn't say goodbye, they just quietly stopped coming. No more lines of weekend cars at the border. No more cheerful voices at the outlets and cafes. They left behind unused ski passes and a once thriving cross-border friendship that now feels a little strained. Back in 2024, over 20 million Canadian travelers crossed into the U.S., spending close to $19.8 billion. But by 2025, that number is sliding fast. In June alone, cross-border car traffic from Canada dropped 33%, marking the 6th straight month of decline. At a well-known ski resort near the Vermont border, 30 to 35% of seasonal passes from Canadian guests were never renewed. That's 1 out of every 3 visitors gone, and with them, income for local ski instructors, shuttle drivers, and small restaurants. If you've ever strolled through a small town near the border, places like Plattsburgh, NY or Darby Line, VT, you may already notice stores are quieter, cafes closing earlier, or fewer hands behind the counter. For local motel owners and diner staff who rely on guests from Toronto or Montreal, this isn't abstract, it's lost income day after day. The loss of Canadian visitors isn't just a footnote, it's playing out in real time at the register. In Jay-Peak, Vermont, a resort that used to see over 3,000 Canadian season pass holders now has fewer than 1,500 renewals, slashing ticket revenue by more than $1.2 million year over year. Local hotels and eateries have shortened hours or closed 2 days a week just to stay afloat. At the St. Bernard de la Colle duty-free shop, once averaging 400 transactions a day, numbers have dropped to under 200, dragging revenue from over $100,000 per day in 2024 to under $55,000 now. One store owner put it plainly, "We're sitting on double the inventory because nothing's moving." Even Vermont Bruco, a local favorite with a loyal Canadian following, saw second quarter sales drop 38%. The reason? A case of their popular IPA that used to cost 25 Canadian dollars now sells for over 36. Thanks to import taxes, about an $8 hike per case. Many customers have shifted to Canadian brands like Molson or Bose, which are cheaper and untaxed. If you're a bartender, cook, or receptionist near the border, you've probably already felt the change: fewer shifts, fewer tips, and too many empty tables where Canadian guests used to sit. With cross-border travel in retreat, towns across the northern U.S. are stepping up efforts to reconnect with their neighbors to the north. In downtown Burlington, Vermont, the popular Church Street was temporarily renamed Canada Street for the month of July. Store signs, banners, and even menus now include French translations as a warm welcome. Shops like Maple Lane Boutique and diners like North Shore Diner are offering at par pricing, meaning Canadians can pay in Canadian dollars at a one exchange rate. That can save travelers 7% to 10% on purchases enough to turn a $50 lunch from nearly 70 Canadian dollars back down to face value. There's also a new initiative called Free Canada Day, rolling out in towns from New York to Michigan, offering free admission to local attractions, lodging discounts, and special perks for Canadians visiting on July 1st, their national holiday. Some hotels even promote deals like buy 2 nights, get 1 free for Canadians, a savings of $200 to $300 per trip. These gestures are more than symbolic. For many border towns that depend on Canadian travelers, from gas stations and grocery stores to motels and roadside diners, this is a matter of survival. If Canadian guests keep staying away, the winter ahead could be a tough one.
Now, according to the U.S. Travel Association, even a 10% drop in Canadian tourists could cost the U.S. more than $2 billion in spending and threaten 140,000 jobs.
You walk into an airport that once buzzed with crowds and excitement. Now, you find rows of empty seats, silent hallways, and closed check-in counters. Sounds dramatic. This is the new reality at America's busiest airports. As airlines and travelers quietly turn away from the United States, there was a time when America's biggest airports bustled. Tourists rushing, constant boarding calls, but since early 2025, over 10 major airlines, including Singapore Airlines, Lufthansa, Emirates, Air France, Play Airlines have quietly cut flights to the U.S. without major announcements. Now, silence lingers at O'Hare, LAX, and JFK. Emptier waiting areas, fewer staff at check-in, and departure boards crowded with canceled routes. In cities like Chicago and New York, the numbers start to feel real. With 85,000 jobs at risk, families are rethinking how to pay the mortgage, keep up with college savings, or cover medical expenses for aging parents. This isn't just about a drop in tourism. It's a wave shaking the foundations of daily life, sometimes leaving the dinner table quieter, and plans for the future more uncertain. With job losses and shrinking incomes, an average family may have to cut $100 from the monthly grocery budget, often buying less fresh meat, milk, or produce. Multiply that by 85,000 workers. And local retailers and food suppliers feel the ripple, making entire cities more cautious. Higher landing fees, complicated visa procedures, and frosty welcomes at border checkpoints have made even the dream of coming to America less certain. These days, even a pricey business class ticket doesn't guarantee easy entry. Every shift cut, every lost dollar, weighs heavier when there are bills to pay and kids asking for new shoes. With fewer hotel guests, staff see their hours cut sometimes by as much as 6 hours per week. That's $240 a month money that once covered groceries, summer camps, or a weekend meal to unwind from the stress. If this continues, hotel and restaurant workers may need to tighten their budgets even further. Shopping for fresh meat, fish, and vegetables might shrink by up to 20%. That's $50 to $100 less per month for every family working in these industries. Not long ago, travelers from Scandinavia, Korea, the UK, and France would visit America touring colleges, attending conferences, or seeking a new kind of summer. Now, they're picking Canada or Japan, which seem more open and welcoming. With everyday essentials, sales expected to drop by $60 million this year. Shop owners face tough choices: cut staff hours, reduce orders, or explain slimmer margins to employees. Shelves aren't empty, but aisles often are, making it hard to plan or invest. As international visitors vanish, local milk sales could drop 15 to 20% from last year. Store owners may lose $1,000 to $2,000 in monthly revenue, affecting fresh product quality and supply, and possibly raising prices if supply chains struggle. In past years, city lights in places like New York or Miami burned bright, thanks to international visitors renting short-term apartments, packing coffee shops, bringing energy to every corner. Now, as British Airways, Lufthansa, and Jetstar all reduce flights, 1.5 million visits simply vanish. Short-term apartment rents in former gateways to America are dropping by an average of $200 per month. For tenants, it sounds like a win. But for landlords who relied on that income to pay debt or cover medical bills, it's nearly $50 million in lost revenue. Quietly, faith in the American dream slips a little more, not just in the eyes of the world, but even for those who once thought they'd finally found stability.
We're selling it for like 40% more just because it's cost so much to get, right? And there's less in stock because people aren't buying this.
Imagine you're running a small auto body shop. Overnight, steel costs shoot up 6 to 9%. Parts orders stall, and workers are sent home early. Sounds absurd, right? But that's exactly what's happening in Detroit, where Canada's silent strike on procurement rules is rippling through U.S. automotive supply chains. A Michigan small business owner opens his shop, only to find this week's steel delivery is delayed again. He's heard friends in nearby towns having similar trouble. Why are steel shelves suddenly empty? And why do prices keep rising? Recently, the U.S. placed a 50% tariff on imported steel and aluminum from Canada. Using Section 232, Canada chose not to fight back with tariffs, but instead quietly changed government buying rules and increased environmental requirements, making it harder for U.S. buyers to get Canadian steel. This has left truckers, warehouse workers, and steel plant crews in cities like Detroit with less to do. Some are called in for fewer shifts. Others watch overtime hours disappear as prices inch upward. Families start to worry if everyday costs will soon follow. For those who rely on steady pay, this uncertainty makes planning for monthly bills more challenging, and conversations at dinner tables start to shift toward cost cutting. If this pattern stays over the next 2 months, an estimated 1,500 steelworkers and drivers in the Midwest may face reduced hours or temporary layoffs as factories scramble for supplies. Even small changes in work schedules can quickly add up, putting extra pressure on households and local businesses that depend on these industries to keep moving. Chaos. The summer brings an uneasy quiet to assembly plants, where once machines ran day and night. Now some lines sit idle waiting for steel shipments that do not arrive on schedule. Ford reports a jump of $2.5 billion in added costs just since the start of the year, driven by shortages and delays. Steel and aluminum prices have risen between 6 and 9% in the last few weeks, eating into company profits and slowing production across Michigan. Factory managers are forced to cut back shifts, while some suppliers consider temporary closures to wait out the shortage. For households depending on those jobs, a single missed paycheck can mean tough choices about groceries, medical bills, or summer repairs. If shortages continue for another month, buyers could see the sticker price for new vehicles go up by as much as $400 before fall. North, Canada is investing $1 billion Canadian dollars to upgrade its steel industry, focusing on electric arc furnaces and stricter environmental standards. The plan is to make steel cleaner and more attractive for markets like the EU. This push for green steel means Canadian exports could soon find new customers abroad, while U.S. producers may face more competition, especially as electric vehicle makers and large infrastructure projects demand lower carbon footprints. For now, U.S. buyers needing green certified steel may have fewer choices and higher costs. In the next 2 months, the price of certified green steel for U.S. construction or auto projects could climb by $45 per ton, adding pressure to project budgets and renovation plans.
With the looming threat of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs, a Buy Canadian movement has picked up across the country. You may have noticed it when you go into grocery stores or supply shops, a tag that tells you if the product you're about to pick up is made in Canada.
What if a simple change in consumer habits led to billions of dollars shifting hands between two close neighbors? If Canadian families suddenly stopped buying 6 everyday American products, would American companies even notice at first? Or would the real shock come months later as lost sales ripple through factories, small towns, and even online platforms? Imagine how daily routines in both countries might quietly transform if trusted brands slowly vanished from shopping carts. For many years, Americans saw Canada as a reliable partner in trade and daily life. But recently, as U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, energy, and autos reached new highs, Canadians have responded in a quietly powerful way. Not with protests, but by simply turning away from certain U.S. products. 6 brands stand out: peanut butter, Harley-Davidson motorcycles, Amazon, Netflix, Walmart house brands, and cars from Ford and GM. This is no longer just an economic move. It has become a cultural statement. We don't support a nation that punishes us. This shift began in the spring of 2025, and by summer, the effect was visible in store aisles across Ontario and British Columbia. For American workers, especially those in manufacturing and retail, each unsold jar or canceled order represents a lost hour of work. If the boycott continues, annual losses for you side. Companies could exceed $2 billion USD, putting pressure on jobs from the factory floor to logistics and marketing teams. Peanut butter, once a pantry staple, tells a striking story. Sales of Jif and Skippy, 2 iconic American brands, dropped 34% in just 1 quarter across Canada. Supermarkets have quickly replaced them with local alternatives like Kraft Canada and Nuts to You. Even Walmart, the retail giant, has found its U.S. made goods left untouched. As Canadian shoppers favor local products or brands from other countries, the message is clear for American producers and investors. Brand loyalty can vanish quickly when national pride is at stake. The ripple effect extends to farmers supplying peanuts, workers in packaging plants, and truck drivers moving goods north. If this trend continues, the U.S. peanut industry alone could see export revenues shrink by up to $150 million USD per year. Amazon's Canadian operation took a direct hit. In early July 2025, Amazon suspended services in Quebec, leading to around 700 job losses. While some customers shifted to Canadian platforms or European tech providers, the trust gap grew. Netflix, another household name, also saw subscription numbers fall as families questioned supporting a U.S. brand in times of economic tension. The tech sector, often seen as immune to politics, is now facing unexpected headwinds. Investors and workers from software developers to warehouse staff could see income growth stall. Projections suggest U.S. e-commerce and streaming exports to Canada may drop by up to $500 million USD this year if consumer confidence does not rebound. Perhaps the most visible shift is in the auto market. After Canada imposed a 25% tariff on U.S. made cars in response to the Trump administration's moves, showroom traffic for Ford and GM sharply declined. Online searches for these brands in Canada plummeted, while orders were canceled and lots stood empty. Canadian drivers quickly switched to Korean and Japanese models like Hyundai, Toyota, and Honda. For small-town dealerships in Michigan and Ohio, every unsold car means tighter budgets and fewer jobs. Industry forecasts indicate U.S. auto exports to Canada could fall by over $2 billion USD in 2025, a sobering figure for anyone whose paycheck depends on cross-border sales.